Revitalization is a number of different things.
I think the revitalization of downtown, to me, is taking what 100 years ago, what these men and women built by hand, and bringing that back to life.
It's all about legacy. It's about being caretakers of buildings that were handed down to us and being able to hand them down to the next generation.
The term revitalization, typically in my mind, involves more than a singular building or even a block. It's something more than that.
Once it's gone, it's gone. There's so much beauty and that cannot be recreated. The craftsmanship cannot be recreated.
I think one of the great things about the Warehouse District is it's almost come full circle. Now we're getting back to the history like it used to be, the enthusiasm, the feeling about downtown. Revitalization is not only moving forward, but it's going back and bringing back that great history.
The Warehouse District Revitalized is made possible by the generous support of the Toledo Warehouse District Association and viewers like you. Thank you.
When we moved downtown, we were the fifth and sixth people living in the immediate downtown area. I think the majority of people thought we were crazy.
Everybody was moving out of downtown for a long time, and here I am investing, and everybody was like, "Are you out of your mind?"
Everyone knew in the backs of their minds, because it had been so ingrained. When you get off the highway, drive through downtown, you don't want to be there. It's not a place for kids to be. Really, there was no reason for people to come downtown.
Toledo was a city built by industrial workers. It was a home to warehouses, factories, glass manufacturers, wholesaling businesses, and a booming auto assembly industry. So when the Great Depression caused manufacturing to slow, Toledo and its community were hit hard. Along with industrial restructuring, highway development, and suburbanization, by the 1970s, much of downtown Toledo was run down or abandoned. The city was in major need of revitalization, not only for the buildings, but also for the community's attitudes toward downtown. Toledo needed visionaries who could see past the blight and abandoned buildings to the bright future this district could hold. One organization spearheaded the redevelopment in the Warehouse District. The group was named the Toledo Warehouse District Association and was founded in the 80s by business owners and residents. Its mission is to benefit businesses, institutions, property owners, residents, and visitors by promoting socioeconomic stability and growth and encouraging the preservation and appreciation of the neighborhood's diversity and history.
When I kind of came into the Warehouse District, it was still very small, and we had lost any funding from the city, and so we had a paid executive director, but we couldn't afford to pay her any longer. And so we got to the point where we maybe had a half a dozen people who were active in the association. We started doing Wander the Warehouse District, and I got involved from that end. And I just so much believed in these restored buildings and the legacy that it created that I started asking people to just come to a monthly meeting and let's talk about the Warehouse District. And that's what evolved into where we're at today.
Well, I think the Warehouse District's a great example of what a grassroots history group can do to preserve a neighborhood. I mean, there's a neighborhood that if someone were to come through here 40 years ago, they'd wonder, how long before this just collapses on itself. And then, lo and behold, people in the community get together, they organize, and, they make clear to everybody else that this is an important, valuable asset to the community and it needs to be protected.
It really, just being one of the early pioneers in the district, it's really been wonderful to watch it grow. The success of the Warehouse District just started when we came downtown, but there's been a lot of people that have really made it happen.
Slowly but surely, more community members began to move in and invest in the Warehouse District. But these buildings were on a whole new scale of renovation. Rather than needing a new roof or updating the interior, these buildings had been abandoned and boarded up. There were holes in the floors and ceilings, outdated electrical systems that had to be completely rewired, and not to mention these buildings had been commercial spaces. So converting a historical warehouse into a home meant starting from square one. And with undertakings of this scale, stories told of renovations of these buildings became just as interesting as their history.
So when you first walk in that door, the front door, those brick arches, when I looked at the building, were filled in with cement and plaster, and they divided it into 3 bays. So I didn't know about the brick at the time. So we knew we had to open it up somewhere, and when they start chiseling away, all of a sudden they found this old brick that when they built the building over 100 years ago, there it was. And they called me right away I was at Fakash's and said, "Ed, you've got to come over here and take a look at this." And so I was just like, oh my God, this is beautiful.
It was a learning experience. You go in very naively thinking, we have this old building, let's just move in there and live, and then you find out there's a whole lot of codes that, especially, I think something that's been very common in our work in downtown is that we went through in Toledo a long phase of no development. So a lot of the buildings we come across, for instance, our house, it had been built in 1905, renovated in 1949. The company moved out in 1962 and had been empty since then. So in 2010, when we started moving, the renovation process, nothing was usable. I mean, things that went in brand new in 1949, lo and behold, not really practical now. So everything had to be ripped out and redone, and you have those, you watch movies or TV shows of people going into like artist lofts and stuff, and it's like, oh, let's just take an empty space and live there. And it's not nearly that easy.
There were things to overcome. And renovating some of these old buildings, it's not the same as putting up something new, but it's got a lot more character and charm. The heating consisted of what I'm going to say was a potbelly stove in every room. The whole 3rd floor of the building was like walking into a black hole. And all the windows it looked like a closed up building, abandoned or whatever you want to call a building. And so if you wanted light in there, they did have one light bulb hanging that you could plug that in. But if you wanted more light than that, then you have to take a piece of plywood off of the window so you could kind of see around and not step in something or trip over something at all. So, and there was actually an old rickety stairway made out of 2x4s going up to the rooftop. So we got to go up there and take a look around and see what was going on. And I had the vision that, yeah, you could do this. It's been done other places, I can do it here. So that's what we did. And now we've got what I think is one of the best places to live that there is in downtown Toledo.
I was doing a TV interview with another one of the Toledo stations at the time, and they asked, what kind of future plans do you have? And I made this general comment about, well, at some point in time, I think we're going to try to save a space in the building and build a loft apartment. That was not a mistake. It actually was a blessing, but as it went, we started getting people calling us, is your house for sale in South Toledo? And this is the truth. I came home from work one night and Susan said, I sold the house today. And oh my gosh, the business was down there and that's all we had in the building at the time. People that bought our house in South Toledo said, we have to be in by September. So I had 13 weeks to build a loft. So I said, well, better do some work.
It was an interesting venture. As I said, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. We, due to financing, did a lot of the work ourselves, meaning demolition, scrapping drywall. We earned our keep down there. My parents visited from West Virginia, and it wasn't until many years later that my mom admitted that she cried the whole way home. You have to understand, it was a 3-story building in the middle of downtown that was just beginning to come back to life again. She also had that same opportunity many years later to cry again because it was such a great venture, such a wonderful landmark, and they were all really proud of us, Steve's parents included.
Back then, and it's still kind of that way, if you can't put sweat equity into the building, you're never going to recover from the financial. I don't think we ever paid anybody to clean up. We told the contractors, work till you're done for the day, we'll clean up at night. And we did that, and that saved a lot of money.
There are some great stories there. I think the story of the St. Clair Street is an important one. That street, those 2 blocks have really, I think, set an example of what can be done. The biggest lesson I think to learn from that is you got to have the architecture there to have something to renovate.
City of Toledo wanted to bring the trail up and turn it and put a 2-story piece of the trail down Lafayette and then curve it through the heart of the warehouse district, take out all of St. Clair. And they got one building stopped as a historic building, and then they worked backwards from there. That's why St. Clair Village is so neat. It was not to be. It was going to curve over to Summit Street and poof, you know. It's an easy way to get in and out of the city.
The story of St. Clair Street begins with the Toledo Warehouse District Association. In the late 90s, the association invested in a catalyst project. Their hope was that it would spur other development in the district. The location chosen was a group of buildings formerly known as the Dixon Block, located at the intersection of Lafayette and St. Clair. Construction began in 1999 under the direction of Kathy Steingraber. This group of buildings was renovated into retail on the first floor and apartments above. These buildings became known as St. Clair Village. 2001 began renovation of another building on the block, and another in 2003. In 2005, the building directly across from St. Clair Village was purchased and renovated. By the time Fifth Third Field completed construction, 3 renovations had taken place on this block. In 2007, local architect Paul Sullivan converted 23 St. Clair Street into his work-live studio. And so it goes, one building at a time, one block at a time, the Warehouse District was being revitalized. Today, the block of South St. Clair Street between Washington and Lafayette is hailed as the most complete street in all of downtown Toledo.
We were a warehouse at first, after it was the hotel, and we were a hotel because the canal system came through. They came down through Swan Creek to the Maumee, and so a lot of those persons who were on those boats would stay. A lot of merchants would come and stay, and then it became a warehouse. Then it became I would say less of a cultural activity going on there. But on my first visit to the second and third floor, every 10 feet there were curtains hanging with a little stove. So there were probably 20 cubicles on each floor, on the first and second floor. I said, oh, this is interesting.
The Warehouse District in Toledo is really the result of a lot of people's love of architecture.
You think about the history and the legacy and the construction quality. How cool to be in your own apartment where the ceilings are 12 feet tall, the windows are 8 feet tall, you have brick interior walls. They're just very cool spaces, and they're not building them that way in new construction.
We found new foundations so this building was built in 1905. We found a previous foundation. We couldn't find any records of what that building had been. We found that we have a well on the property because our building was built, there's a warehouse behind us that had built oil rigging pieces, a lot of metal work. And what we renovated as our house was the office for that building and a machine shop. And in the building, they had a well that's the second deepest well in Lucas County, and had no idea it was there until we started the renovation and started looking into it, and it was just there for cooling for the process of the metal work.
Normally, renovations are pretty costly when you look at them because there's so many unknowns in a building to renovate. You do it more out of the love of the building and seeing something restored than you would be to try to be economical, unless you're a business that knows how to do that.
You know, the other interesting aspect about the Warehouse District is it's very similar to the old West End in the fact that when people do move in, they have to learn the history of the building they're in. So you can't just, even if you're just renting, you can't just tell someone, I live in the Old West End. It's like, well, which house? And then you want to know, well, who owned it? What business were they in? And I think it's the same way with the Warehouse District, that every building has a story. And everyone who lives in those buildings is a storyteller. And you have to be, because people want to know, why did you choose to live there? Well, then you tell the history, and it's a much more interesting discussion.
I've opened 3 businesses downtown, all restaurants. The older buildings are truly in the Warehouse District. And in the history, when I looked at the building I'm in now at the Blarney, it was Gilbert Mailing for the longest time. It's been a grocery store, it's been a barber shop, it's been a lot of stuff over the years. And that's what brought me to look. And when I decided to open up a pub, I didn't know what kind of bar until I went over to Ireland and went into some really cool old Irish pubs, and it was like, this is what I want. And downtown Toledo has a building that I think I could do it in.
In addition to residential pioneers in the Warehouse District, there were pioneer business owners who took chances on buildings long before it was popular. One such pioneer business owner is the Appold family, who purchased the Oliver House in 1990. This luxurious pre-Civil War hotel was built in 1859 and designed by a popular architect of the time named Isaiah Rogers. Every one of its 171 rooms had its own fireplace, running water, and gas lighting. In 1919, just 60 years after opening, the building was gutted to become a building for an industrial plant. It was bought and sold several times before being bought by the Appold family in 1990. While this important Middle Grounds landmark remained standing, a lot of restoration work needed to be done to bring the building back to life. Today, the Oliver House is home to the Maumee Bay Brewing Company, Rockwell Steakhouse, beer memorabilia in the Toledo Brewing Hall of Fame and Museum, and the cafe. This historic building also stands as the only remaining hotel designed by Isaiah Rogers. Another early pioneer was Ken Knight. Along with his brother K.C., Ken purchased the Knight Insurance Building at 22 North Erie Street in 1983. Vacant for 30 years prior, the building had holes in the roof, boarded up windows, and plenty of dirt and filth. But it also had interior brick and hardwood floors, and Ken saw potential. Because of its condition and location, he was able to buy a much larger space than he needed at an affordable price. Then he renovated sections at a time, renting out the second floor as an income stream. As the business grew, he renovated more space, eventually taking over the second floor for the insurance agency. In 2006, the building expanded into the old Bueller Hardware Building, and in 2017, Knight bought the Florist Exchange Building.
We just bought the building next to us, the old Florist Exchange, and that's for that main purpose was to convert their third floor into our new residence. Because the idea of the baby boomers coming back downtown and having one big open loft area. We live in a house that was built in Maumee in the 1920s, which no longer serves the purpose of people our age. You had so many different rooms for things, the formal dining rooms, the formal living rooms, that don't serve a lot of purpose anymore. So the idea of moving into a large loft and having everything really opened up for us, that's kind of what we're excited about doing.
I purchased it in 2000. I was running out of space in my law office down by the courthouse on Michigan Street, and I wanted to move to something bigger. And I was looking at Southwick because one of my major clients was there, but I ended up driving by this building on Huron Street and asked my realtor, could we look at it? And the first thing he said to me after we looked at it, stop gushing, you're raising the price of the building. And I ended up purchasing it. Subsequently, I bought the building in the parking lot next to me. And after 6 months of renovations, we moved in.
Most of the buildings were vacant back in around the 2000 era, and things slowly, and when I mean slowly started to move. And I think a lot of people didn't believe that it could transform into what it is today. And I think that everybody who has moved down there for whatever the reasons are very happy that they've done it.
The beauty of the Renaissance in the Warehouse District is that different developers were seizing opportunities at the same time. Restaurants like the Blarney and Paco's at the Park were developed at the same time as Art Supply Depot and Porter Architects. Another key element of renovation is increased residential opportunities. Until 2006, most residential spaces being renovated were under 20 units. The Bartley Lofts and the Standard changed this. These two buildings are not only two of the taller buildings in the district, but also in prime locations. Combined, they offer a total of 127 residential units to an up-and-coming neighborhood. The Bartley Lofts, a condominium project, welcomed its first residents in 2006. It has 52 units, with underground parking and a swimming pool on the rooftop. The Standard, located on the corner of Erie and Washington, was an instant hit when it opened in 2011. This redeveloped hardware warehouse has 75 residential units, all of which were occupied in record speed. On the heels of its success, the developers looked for another opportunity and found it on the corner of Erie and Washington. The Berdan building sat vacant for roughly 50 years. The building was the subject of many development dreams. Once it was to be the home of the University of Toledo College of Law. Other developers drew up plans for residential, but they couldn't get financing. The building was in very rough shape and had severe water damage due to a hole in the roof. The project was more challenging than Standard, but with diligence and ingenuity, the renovation of Berdan became a reality in 2017.
The fact that people want to move down there, you go down there on the weekends, sometimes even Thursday nights, just people walking around. It's really fascinating to think that they used to all go out to the suburbs to hang out. Now they come downtown to hang out, and who'd ever thunk it? I mean, it just, the electricity that I felt when the ballpark moved in the neighborhood has continued, and now it's in the neighborhood in the forms of entertainment district and bars and restaurants, and and it spills. I mean, the people that aren't in the Warehouse District get some of the benefit of it. The Huntington Center is just a few blocks away. The ballpark is right in the Warehouse District. The residents that are moving in are not only moving into the Warehouse District, moving in other places downtown. That's positive.
I had friends, or a friend in particular, that visited from the Akron area, and I remember him just being in awe. He's like, oh my God, this is so fantastic. You guys have the riverfront and these buildings and this cool little warehouse section or district. So he's like, you guys have everything here. All the parts and pieces are here to make a really cool downtown and inner city area. So, and I always thought that was funny to get the perspective of somebody from outside of the area thinking, wow, you guys have all this stuff here. This is great, and a lot of people at the time anyway, again, questioned that a little bit. And I just think there was a generation maybe that grew up thinking, oh my God, downtown, And I think we're finally at that point where people are like, oh yeah, it's awesome down there. It's great. Yeah, there's so much happening. But it literally took 20 years.
For somebody that says there's nothing to do in Toledo, how? Sometimes just like to poke them in the nose. Get off the couch and go check it out. And for some reason, people still have this safety issue, and not so.
When I was growing up, nobody wanted to go downtown because one-way streets, there was nothing there, everybody complained about parking. And sometimes we Toledoans can be our worst enemy because we hang on to those images of the past. And then you have the new people coming in, the young college graduates who don't have those misconceptions or those impressions of Toledo from 20 years ago. They see it for what it is today. And they've really helped, I think, change the dynamic down there.
Since its humble beginnings with 1 or 2 renovations, the Toledo Warehouse District now has roughly 50 renovated buildings in its 33-block area. And the momentum doesn't stop there. With at least 5 more buildings in the works, soon all of the buildings in the district will be renovated. While it would be impossible to tell the story of everyone who has helped bring this district back to life, one thing is certain. Every building has an unforgettable story of sweat equity and an owner who is willing to take a risk against all odds. The success of the Toledo Warehouse District is not thanks to one person. It's a collective narrative of a neighborhood who, piece by piece, invested in the same dream. A dream of taking a district of historic warehouses that were abandoned and dilapidated and giving them a new life, a new purpose, a new story. This is Toledo Stories, the Warehouse District Revitalized.
The Warehouse District Revitalized is made possible by the generous support of the Toledo Warehouse District Association and viewers like you. Thank you.